turn the mic platform over to you and let you continue.
Thank you. You better show me which one does what. Technical challenge.
Forward, back, and there's your pointer. Okay, so the red one's the pointer, but these are forward and back real
Okay.
easy.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. First thing, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm glad to see you here. I hope you can say you were glad you were here. First thing I'm going to do is go by the rules that I didn't read before I came. It said you were supposed to be casual today. Now, in the old days, casual was undoing your tie and taking off your jacket. So now I am old school casual. I'll be over here on the floor. And today is a lot about the textile industry, a little bit about me because I've been around it so long, and my association with Dr. L.B. Arnold is one that I would like to share with you before we start. Luther, I met Luther when I was 15 years old. I was a sophomore in high school in Burlington, North Carolina. And the way I met Luther was the way so many things have happened in my career. Pure, unadulterated luck is all I can say. He loved driving Oldsmobiles. And my father managed a Chevrolet Oldsmobile dealership in a little town in North Carolina until he moved to a Chevrolet dealership in Graham, North Carolina, and he kept his Oldsmobile. And Dr. Arnold decided that he liked somebody that liked an Oldsmobile that much keeping up his car. So my father kept his car up. Dr. Luther drove 60,000 to 70,000 miles a year in that Oldsmobile. One afternoon he was down there. He had a big trip, going to be gone for 3 or 4 days, as was typical in the old days. And his air conditioner was broken. And it was like 5 o'clock. My father stayed and fixed his air conditioner. Didn't go home. And Dr. Luther offered to pull out his wallet like we all salespeople do, and we were going to offer him a tip. My father had a rule in life. As long as he never tipped if you didn't accept one. And he never tipped and he never accepted one. So Dr. Luther said, well, what can I do for you someday, Jim? He said, my son's a sophomore over at Walter Williams High School. And so they're just selected him to go to a gifted children's program up in the mountains at Cullowhee in Western Carolina. But he says it's $45 for a 5-week chemistry course. And $45 in 1956 and 7 was one hell of a lot of money. It was probably a half a week's pay for my father, plus he'd planned for me to work all summer. And Dr. Arnold said, well, let me see what I can do about that, Jim. So he came back a couple of days later and he said, you need to have Preston over at Burlington Industries. And gave me the time and the date and said, Burlington is going to give him a scholarship to go to that class. And sure enough, a 15-year-old kid had to learn how to tie a tie. Went over and met with the division manager, the plant manager at Burlington House Fabrics. And Dr. Arnold, I don't think my father wouldn't go, it was just me. Took a picture of us, me holding up a check for $45, made out to that program. And that's how I met Dr. Arnold. As luck would have it, years later when I bought a house in Burlington after I went to work for Burlington Industries, after doing it was an apprenticeship program, but we didn't call it that. We called it being too poor to go to school in the fall if you didn't work your butt off during the summer. And so I did that with Burlington for 4 years. But it turned out the house I bought was right around the corner where Dr. Arnold lived. Got to know his wife, he got to know my wife, we had dinner together several times, just a great relationship. I had a little bit of relationship with Walker, never could pronounce his name, Walukowicz. And because later he had a chemical company, And then, of course, I knew Herman Goldstein from his Sun Chemical days, because I am, as my grandkids say, older than dirt. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of applicators and the role that they have played in chasing water out of the textile industry. And that's what my career has been about. Water is the most necessary thing to our industry that there ever was, because of the old rule about the secret to pollution is dilution. We had to dilute our chemicals because we didn't know how to put them on if they weren't diluted. We had to dilute our wastewater because we didn't know what else to do with it to get the color out and the chemical concentration down. So we were a classic example of water hungry. My agenda today is talking about applicators. See if I can find that little red button. We're going to wring it out, pound it out, we're going to squeeze it out, we're going to vacuum it out, we're going to kiss it out, spray it out, foam it out, plasma it out, and then guess what? Well, we'll see that in a minute. I told you about, I didn't know y'all were going to go through the whole beginning of the conference, so I stuck a little something in there just because I knew there would be some people here that may be here for the first time, but y'all did a great job of covering that. Let's talk about wringing it out. In the beginning. Anybody remember where that phrase came from? In the beginning.
Yeah.
All right, I want to ask you a question. Oh, that's the other thing. Second rule after you get casual is this conference is going to be like the way it used to be. You're going to be talking to him, and he's going to be talking to her, and she's going to be talking. The talk is going to go this way. A little bit's going to come this way, because at my age, every day I have left is precious. And I didn't plan to come down here for 3 days and listen to myself talk. Okay? I came down here to learn something. And the only way I'm going to learn something is if you guys speak up, because I know everything I know. And you're going to know when you leave here everything I tell you. But you're not going to know everything I know. Okay? So we got to learn. Stop me anytime. When we finish, we'll be finished. We're going to be finished in the allotted 2 hours. We might be finished in 40 minutes. We'll be finished in 15 if I have to do all the talking. Okay? Now, in the beginning, well, my first question, who is that?
Your mom?
No, it's actually not. It's one picture after mom. Who is that? We know the name that goes with those hands. His name was Adam. Now he's doing this because of Mom, Eve, because she bit the apple, to read the story. And when she bit the apple, they had to put on fig leaves. And when they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, there weren't any fig leaves. They had to wash the ones they had on. And Adam discovered, after the very first laundry, that it took 6 hours for his fig leaf to dry. But when he washed it, it only took 3 hours. Why is that? Because he could wring it harder than Eve. And that has been the basic principle of how we've dealt with water starting in the beginning. We have wrung it out. One shape, form, or fashion, we've wrung it out. So we're going to talk about wringing. Another way we've gotten it out is to pound it out. What I mean by pounding it out. The early man, quick history class, was nomadic. And he wandered from one place to the other. He stayed on land until what happened? Who remembers? Who knows? You read your history book. He wore it out.
Yeah, that's right.
He wore it out. He planted corn year after year after year, and the corn was this high, this high, this high, and this high, and he said, move downstream. He always settled in water, and he always settled where the land was fertile. Well, that worked for a long time. Until one day, this could have been his wife, probably one of his kids, erroneously planted the corn where the beans had been planted all this time. Damn corn came back up to here. Well, what's happened? They learned crop rotation. When they learned how to rotate crops, they could stay in the same piece of land for a longer time, except for one problem. What? Either it gave out or it got polluted. So they had to move on. But they didn't have to move on any longer for the land. So what did they do? See if I can get this thing to work. Oh, wait a minute. Wrong button. Remember we started with Adam? Let me see. How long have I been talking? Let me see.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
In 10 minutes, I have brought this textiles industry from Adam and Eve to 1820. I have no idea how many years that is. But we've covered it in 10 minutes. Y'all think of anything I left out? I can't find anything in the textbooks I left out. But when man settled down and learned how to rotate crops, he was already near water, and some enterprising, could have been a lady. There's a lot of women that didn't get credit for all the things. Eve's the only person that ever got credit for the rest of her life of which she did. We don't do that to most women. We take the credit where it's good and leave it to them when it's bad. But we're at 1830, and now we got a laundry spring up. Why did that laundry spring up, you reckon? Again, some enterprising guy said, look, we got all these people around here. They're all doing laundry on Wednesday. I don't know why it was Wednesday. And maybe I'll do everybody's laundry. And then they can go plant their crops and have another day to work. And I said, well, that's not a bad idea. So somebody opened up a laundry. Now this next thing that happened, I know was a woman. That mandrel right there was heavy as hell. And it had to be cranked up and dropped down, squeeze the water out of the garment, crank it back up, stick another bunch of garments under it, squeeze it. And, you know, he came home so tired at night he couldn't even sleep or do anything else. She said, why don't you put a pulley on that thing and roll it back and forth and squeeze. Don't have to be lifted up and down, just roll it back and forth. And then somebody, even a little more enterprising, about 20 years later said, well, why don't we put one roll on top of the other? Again, it was probably his wife. She said, you put one roll on top of the other, and I can feed the garments through that roll, and we can get this whole laundry over in 5 or 6 hours, and you can come home at night not so tired. Now, I don't know if it actually happened that way, but it's a hell of a lot better story than just, reading it and not paying attention to what's really going on. So now, when I went into textile business, I went to work in '61. I heard people talking about squeezers. I heard them talk about mangles. I heard them talk about patters. So I went out in the plant one day and I'm looking for a squeezer. Can't find it. Looking for a mangle. Can't find it. I get down to bib in '71, and that's what they called the first pad that was in a line in front of a stack of dry cans before then you had a pad, or the first one was a mangle. And I'll be damned if it didn't look just like a pad. I couldn't see a bit of difference in it, but those terminologies were always fascinating to me until I did a little bit of this research for this paper and found out they pretty much originated from laundries and from the way textiles were done originally. So now we're up to the 1800s. We got patters and we got squeezers. And here's what kind of some of the original squeezers looked like. They were not originally crowned like you see in here for some period of time. But we discovered that with a squeezer, or a roller, or a mangle, or patter, if you put something on the ends that will pull the ends down, you don't have to make the rolls this big around. Just from the weight of the roll, you now can put pressure on the ends, and then we learned to motorize that, and we learned to air pressure it, we learned to hydraulically cylinder it. But what we learned, we pull down on the ends. Guess what we learned about rolls when you pull down on the ends? Anybody know? They blow up. They deflect. And when they deflect, whatever we're putting through them comes out one wet pickup in the middle and a different wet pickup on the sides. But the pad was still better than the old-timey mangle. Now, you know, in this talk, we're going to sort of bring the industry up from Adam and Eve to the 18 to 1900s, and then we're going to take each one of these inventions and take them from that period up to today.